Good afternoon, Stephen. Yes, I spoke to Niel Pretorius earlier today about their financial results, but what was interesting is his comments when it comes to the social and economic challenges that are facing South Africa. We spoke about the inflation data. We saw it coming out 7.8%. He also spoke about, he had strong views. He has strong views about government inability to implement policy. We've spoken about this many, many times. And we spoke about Zamazamas and the problem that Zamazamas actually pose to the South African economy. And this is how that interview went when I started asking him about generally how the group performed when it comes to last year's results.
Look, first of all, everybody showed up. So we had uninterrupted production for the entire year, and we're very thankful for that. We appreciate and we recognize our staff and labor for playing their part in delivering these results. It wasn't the easiest of years. Obviously, there were, the year started off poorly with the riots in KwaZulu-Natal, so there were some logistical issues. We had some really bad weather during December and January. Bad weather in the sense of 3 times more rain than what we're used to for this area. And then, of course, there was also load shedding in February and March in particular. So during that period, we really had to keep our wits together and about us in order to continue at least to achieve volume throughput. So the production was there. You'd see that the gold production was pretty much flat year on year. But we have seen some fairly steep increases in certain costs. We also had some additional transportation costs, which also impacted the bottom line. So on the whole, it was a steady year and a good performance considering the situation or the circumstances under which our staff had to operate this year. So on the whole, satisfied with how things panned out for us.
Let's talk about economic growth through your lens and how you see it. We saw today from Stats SA that inflation has gone up to 7.8% in July. Interest rates have been rising. How do you see the economic growth outlook for 2022?
Yes. Look, obviously, we've got to deal with inflation like everybody else in the world now. For many, many years, we've had overstimulation of the capital markets by the introduction of very cheap capital in order for us to not have to adjust our lifestyle. And maybe that wasn't the smartest thing to do, but be that as it may, we're in that situation now. And look, I think the rate at which the economy grows, the fact that we would hopefully have more reliable and affordable electricity going forward, that would definitely be a stimulus for economic growth. But we also still need to make this environment conducive and attractive for capital investment. So hopefully we could see more on the part of government to re-establish sovereignty, to re-establish law and order, to eradicate criminality, to establish social stability. And also maybe there are 1 or 2 ideological rethinks that we need to do. I think a lot of what government has modeled for its economic model relies on a strong bureaucracy. But we do not have a strong bureaucracy. The capacity is simply not there. And as a consequence, many of these plans, which theoretically ought to have worked and ought to have worked well, are not working at all. And it's holding the economy back. So maybe we just need to have a bit of a rethink, much in the same way as we've had a rethink about having a state monopoly over power supply. There's no reason why we shouldn't have robust economic growth. I think South Africans, there's a lot of capital in the country, and a lot of capital goes into society on a monthly basis by way of salaries and also by way of social grants. So there's cash, but the cash is not exchanging hands often enough. It's not being recycled often enough, so to speak. And we need to provide an opportunity for that, but the right climate for that to happen. And hopefully we will. I think things are looking better now than what it did a year ago, notwithstanding the fact that it's not looking great, but it's certainly there are bits and pieces that are starting to emerge, little bright spots that are starting to emerge from the gloom. So we're confident that investing capital in this climate is the right thing to do, and we hope that other corporates do the same. And we hope that government will continue to play its part like it did with Eskom, be a little bit more pragmatic and make it more attractive for business to invest. And that will lead to jobs. Jobs is a consequence of a robust and a growing economy. It can never be a target, but it will be a very welcome consequence of a robust economy based on healthy fundamentals.
And Niel, let's talk about something else that's quite important as a gold mining company. You've seen the warning that was fired by the Fraser Institute, the survey that was released, putting South Africa's ranking for the first time in the world's 10 least attractive mining destination in their latest survey, the annual survey of mining companies. That's deeply disappointing, and you are operating in that space, and I'm sure you are familiar with the findings of this survey.
You just see how we have just generated close to R1 billion in free cash. We're a company that recycles old waste, and that's the sort of margin that we managed to maintain. We had revenues of close to R6 billion. It's possible for companies to still do really well in this country, and many resources companies do. In fact, some of the best resources companies in the world operate in South Africa, and they outperform their peers in other countries. What the Fraser Institute is telling us is how attractive it is from a political governance perspective. So if you read policy, if you look at sort of the framework within which you're investing your money and the extent to which you can rely on government, on the state, to look after that, to provide security of tenure and to be supportive, the ease of doing business, then we're ranking low. But if you look at South African business people who take on these challenges, invest the right capital, implement the right strategies, have the right sort of interpretation of their risk and manage their businesses towards those risks, they're doing well, and they're outperforming companies in countries that are supposedly far more attractive. So the Fraser Institute is not a call to the private sector to measure up. The private sector is measuring up. The private sector is doing its part. The Fraser Institute is a wake-up call to the state to say, this is how you compare to other jurisdictions. From a political governance perspective, this is where you rank. This is where you stand. You are pushing people away. You have a strong economy, not because of the environment that you're creating from a political and regulatory perspective. You have a strong economy because you have a robust private sector, but you are creating drag. You are bad for the economy. Revisit your policies. That's what the Fraser Institute says. So I'm hoping the government paid attention. We were accused of underselling South Africa. I'll never undersell South Africa. This will always be my number one destination. It's a wonderful place to do business. But we do well despite government, not because of government. And that's what the Fraser Institute is telling us.
What would your approach be to this long-standing issue of what we call zamazamas and what others refer to as artisanal miners? A serious issue in South Africa. How would you approach that issue, because it's become another hot topic?
Yes. Look, the fact of the matter is that there are certain areas in South Africa where state sovereignty has been lost, where these are criminal enclaves, where criminal gangs where they live and from where they operate. They terrorize their surrounding communities, and they're breaking the laws of South Africa. And it's not just that they're illegal miners, but they're stealing our infrastructure. They're breaking down public property. They're destroying the electricity grid. We no longer have railways because the cables have been stolen. The rails are now being stolen. There are areas where there are informal settlements on top of where we're supposed to have railways. So there, unfortunately, the private sector is not going to be able to provide the solution. We can defend ourselves against that by putting in the appropriate security measures. But they're the state, who is the only legitimate holder of, that has the monopoly of the legitimate exercise of force. There the state would have to step in. And there all South Africans need to call upon the state to step in and to do the necessary. At this stage, we are not prosecuting these crimes appropriately. We are not processing people involved in these crimes appropriately. If you are involved in the illegal mining of minerals, if you're involved in the destruction of public property, there should be a process in terms of which the rest of society can be assured that you are removed from society with a degree of permanence for a few years at least, while you're being processed, while you're being prosecuted, while you're being incarcerated. And after that period, because so many of these, and I really want to, one needs to be so careful of not stirring up xenophobia, because there are so many people from outside of South Africa who are positively contributing to our economy. But unfortunately, many of these Zama gangs are from surrounding states. So there also needs to be a process in terms of which, once you've served your time as an undocumented foreigner who's committed one of these special crimes, that you serve your time, your 3 years, your 5 years, or whatever, that you deported. And if you then return to South Africa and resume your activities, then maybe 3 years should become 10 years, and 10 years should become 15 years. That doesn't exist. That regime doesn't exist, as a consequence of which they're a law unto themselves. They have no regard for the police. They have no respect for the laws of this country. They have no respect for public property. And they, as I say, they're terrorizing our communities, and they're subverting our economy. Something needs to be done, and unfortunately there, government has to do its job. The private sector cannot do it for them.
On that note, let's take a closer look at how the markets are doing at this hour.